The buzz of Callie Morgan's phone barely registered as she sat in her small but tastefully decorated living room, laptop open, half a glass of wine sitting beside her. She had been wrapping up a property listing, finalizing descriptions for a 2-bedroom condo downtown when the message arrived. Her teenage nephew, Tyler, rarely texted her so late. Tyler, hey, Aunt Callie. I don't know if I should send this, but you need to see it. A link followed. A live-streamed video. Frowning, Callie clicked on it, her heartbeat quickening as she adjusted her earbuds. The grainy quality smoothed out as the image stabilized, a warm, familiar setting. Her mother's house. The family gathered around the dinner table, laughing, drinking, eating Sunday supper together, a tradition she had started skipping over the past few months due to work. At first, she felt a pang of longing. Then, her mother's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and distinct. She wasted her life, honestly, Monica Morgan was saying, swirling her wine glass. I mean, real estate? Of all things? She was supposed to be a nurse. We had a plan. Then she threw it all away. Callie's fingers gripped the armrest of her couch. Her mother's words settled heavily in her chest, suffocating. She acts like a martyr, but really, it's embarrassing, Monica continued. Still renting, no husband, no kids, just running around selling houses like that's some grand achievement. She could have been something. Laughter followed. Not loud, not raucous, but enough. Enough to make Callie's stomach twist. She felt frozen, as if she had stepped outside of her own body, watching this unfold from a distance. She had sacrificed so much, pouring her energy, money, and time into making sure her mother had everything she needed. The medication, the doctor's visits, the therapy sessions, the home modifications, all of it funded by Callie's quiet, determined efforts. She had emptied her savings, given up on vacations, and worked herself into exhaustion to make sure Monica was cared for. And yet, this was how she spoke about her? The video kept going. Someone asked about Callie's absence. Oh, who knows? Monica scoffed. Probably working late like she always does. Or maybe she finally found someone to put up with her. Aunt Linda's voice cut in, softer but firm. That's not fair, Monica. She's done a lot for you. Monica sighed dramatically. Oh, please. I never asked for that. She made her own choices. Callie's blood turned to ice. She shut the laptop with a snap, yanking her earbuds out as if they burned her. The room around her felt smaller, the walls pressing in. She had done this for love. Out of duty. She had given up everything to make sure her mother was cared for, never asking for gratitude but hoping, deep down, that at least her mother saw the truth. Instead, she had been a fool. The betrayal cut deep. A tear slipped down her cheek, hot and fast, but she wiped it away furiously. She wouldn't cry. Not for this. Not for a woman who didn't see her worth. Her phone buzzed again. Tyler, I'm sorry. I thought you should know. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she had no words. Callie stood abruptly, pacing. The apartment was silent except for the occasional hum of a passing car outside. She ran a hand through her thick brown hair, breathing heavily. She could call her mother. Confront her. Demand an explanation. But what good would it do? Monica had spoken freely, unfiltered, her words a raw, unvarnished truth. And Callie? She had spent years trying to prove her worth to someone who never truly saw her. Her eyes landed on the stack of bills on her desk. Medical statements, insurance forms, receipts for everything she had paid for. Proof of her sacrifices. For the first time, she saw them differently, not as burdens, not as responsibilities, but as chains. She grabbed the topmost envelope, flipping it open. Another payment due. Another reminder of what she had given up. A deep, bitter laugh escaped her lips. This wasn't love. This was obligation. And it was killing her. Callie sank onto the couch, gripping the envelope tightly. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop. For the first time in years, the thought wasn't just terrifying. It was liberating. Callie sat motionless on her couch, the envelope still gripped in her hands. Her heart pounded so loudly in her ears that the world outside, her buzzing phone, the distant hum of traffic, the ticking of the clock on her wall, became nothing more than a muffled backdrop. Her mother's voice still echoed in her mind. She acts like a martyr. She wasted her life. She had heard hurtful things before. Little jabs, passive-aggressive remarks, moments when Monica's disappointment seeped into conversation. But this wasn't a fleeting comment muttered in frustration. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a bad mood. It was real. It was how her mother saw her. A wave of nausea rolled through her. She had spent years trying to do the right thing, sacrificing her own goals to be the daughter Monica needed. Or rather, the daughter she thought Monica needed. When her mother was first diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, Callie had made a choice. She dropped out of nursing school just a semester before earning her degree, thinking she would go back once things settled. But things never settled. The doctor's visits turned into prescriptions, which turned into physical therapy sessions, which turned into unexpected hospital stays. Her mother, once strong and independent, became someone who required care, financial and emotional. And Callie had stepped up without question, because that was what family did. She worked tirelessly, building her real estate career from scratch, barely sleeping as she juggled clients, late-night showings, and endless paperwork. Every extra dollar went toward Monica's care: insurance copays, accessible home modifications, specialized treatments that weren't covered. And now, here she was. She had given everything. And in return, embarrassment, disdain. Callie inhaled sharply, blinking away the stinging in her eyes. She wasn't going to cry over this. She had already given Monica enough. She wouldn't give her this moment, too. Instead of reaching for another tissue, she reached for her laptop. She pulled up her financial records, her meticulously kept spreadsheets tracking every expense, every payment made on her mother's behalf. As the screen illuminated in front of her, she clicked through the documents, scrolling past line after line of transactions. Doctor visits, $250. Specialist appointment, $600. New adjustable bed, $1,400. Physical therapy sessions, $3,200. On and on the numbers went, each one a piece of her sacrifices. At the bottom of the page, the final tally stared back at her. $107,438.62. She exhaled slowly. Over $100,000. Her stomach twisted. That was her savings. Her future. The down payment for a home. The tuition she had once planned to put toward finishing her nursing degree. And yet, her mother spoke about her as if she were nothing. Callie's hands trembled as she clicked open her email. Her first instinct was to type a message to Tyler, thanking him for sending the video, even though it hurt like hell. He hadn't meant to hurt her. If anything, he had done her a favor. But instead, she hesitated. Instead of writing to Tyler, she opened a new draft. To Monica Morgan. Subject: reality check. She stared at the blank space, her fingers poised over the keyboard. A dozen thoughts swirled in her mind, each sharper than the last. She wanted to demand an explanation, to ask how Monica could speak so cruelly about the daughter who had given everything for her. But something stopped her. Did it even matter? Monica had shown her true feelings. No email, no confrontation, no carefully worded plea would change that. Callie's hands hovered, then slowly lowered. No, she wasn't going to waste another second seeking validation from someone who would never give it. Instead, she closed the email and opened a new folder on her desktop. Proof. Clicking through her records, she began compiling every bill, every transaction, every financial document that traced back to her mother's care. Not for her mother's sake, Monica had made it clear that gratitude was not something she possessed. No, this was for Callie. This was a reminder. A wake-up call. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't overreacting. She had given everything. And now it was time to stop. Her breath was steady as she saved the folder, closing her laptop with a decisive snap. For the first time in years, she felt something close to relief. She wasn't going to delete the video. She wasn't going to pretend she hadn't seen it. She was going to face the truth. And then, she was going to walk away. The next morning, Callie woke up with an unfamiliar clarity, a feeling both foreign and liberating. It wasn't a soft realization, nor was it gentle. It was a fire. A slow, steady burn deep in her chest that grew stronger with every passing minute. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up with a weight on her shoulders. No more carrying burdens that weren't hers. No more sacrificing her own life for someone who saw her as nothing more than an obligation. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and reached for her phone. Her hands were steady as she scrolled through her contacts, stopping at one name. Tyler. She hesitated for only a second before pressing the call button. It rang twice before his voice came through, groggy but alert. "Aunt Callie?" "Hey, kiddo," she said, forcing a small smile. "You busy today?" There was a pause. No. "Why?" "Let's meet up," she said simply. "I want to talk." An hour later, Callie sat across from Tyler in a quiet corner of a small coffee shop. He looked nervous, shifting in his seat as he stirred his iced latte. "I, wasn't sure if you were mad at me," he admitted, keeping his gaze lowered. Callie exhaled. "I'm not mad at you, Tyler. If anything, I'm grateful." He finally met her eyes, his brows furrowing. "Grateful?" She nodded. "I would have kept going for years, not realizing how she really saw me. But now I know." Tyler's jaw tightened. "It's not fair. You've done everything for Grandma. More than anyone else in the family. And he cut himself off, shaking his head. "I don't get it. I don't get how she could say those things." Callie smiled sadly. "I don't get it either. But I'm done trying to." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, setting it on the table between them. Tyler's eyes flickered to it, confused. "What's this?" "Proof," she said, tapping a finger against the cover. "Every medical bill, every insurance payment, every single thing I've covered for her over the past 5 years." Tyler flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with each line he read. "Over 100 grand, he murmured. Callie nodded. "And she doesn't care." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "So what are you gonna do?" She took a deep breath, steady and sure. "I'm walking away." Tyler blinked. "You mean?" "I mean I'm done," she clarified. "I'm not paying for anything else. I'm removing myself from her accounts. I'm focusing on my own life for once." Tyler sat back in his chair, absorbing her words. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Good." Callie's eyebrows lifted. "You're not going to try to convince me otherwise?" "No," he said firmly. "I love Grandma, but she doesn't deserve what you've done for her. And if she won't appreciate it, then she doesn't deserve you." A lump formed in Callie's throat. She hadn't expected support. If anything, she had braced herself for pushback. But here Tyler was, the only one in the family who had seen the truth from the start. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," he squeezed back. "I've got your back, Aunt Callie. No matter what." By the time Callie returned home, her plan was set in motion. She settled at her desk and pulled up her insurance accounts, her hands no longer trembling. One by one, she removed herself as the guarantor for her mother's medical expenses. Then she moved to her email, composing a message to her mother's primary care provider, officially withdrawing herself from financial responsibility. She didn't stop there. Next, she drafted a message to her extended family, every cousin, aunt, and uncle who had ever assumed she would handle things because she always had. Subject: no longer responsible. Dear family, I wanted to take a moment to share something important. For the past 5 years, I have single-handedly covered all of my mother's medical expenses, therapy sessions, insurance costs, and home care needs. This has amounted to over $100,000, money that came directly from my personal finances, my savings, and my future. Until now, I never asked for help. I never asked for recognition. I did it because I believed it was the right thing to do. However, I have come to the painful realization that my sacrifices have never been acknowledged, let alone appreciated. It has become clear that my efforts have not only gone unnoticed, but have been met with disrespect. Effective immediately, I am stepping away. I will no longer be financially responsible for Monica Morgan's care. Any future expenses will need to be handled by those who believe it is their duty to do so. I am sharing this because I refuse to be guilt, manipulated, or shamed into continuing this role. If anyone would like to take on the responsibility, I encourage you to step forward. Sincerely, Callie Morgan. She reread the email twice before pressing send. Then, with a long exhale, she shut her laptop. For the first time in years, the weight was gone. Callie woke up to her phone vibrating against her nightstand, the screen lighting up with a barrage of notifications. The email she had sent the night before had done exactly what she expected. It set off a firestorm. She hesitated for only a moment before unlocking her phone. Uncle Richard, Callie, we need to talk. Call me. Aunt Denise, are you serious? Just like that? You're abandoning your own mother? Cousin Laura, you've always been dramatic. I can't believe you'd do this to her. Aunt Linda, proud of you. Call if you need anything. Callie exhaled slowly. The backlash had come as expected. There was always going to be outrage, always going to be someone accusing her of being selfish. But then there was Aunt Linda, one of the few people who had always seen things clearly. She tossed her phone onto the bed and swung her legs over the side, stretching as she tried to shake off the weight of the morning. Today was the day. She wasn't just sending emails or making declarations, she was cutting the ties for real. By the time she was dressed and out the door, coffee in hand, she had a plan. First, the insurance companies. The hold music played in her ear as she tapped her fingers against the counter of the cafe she had stopped at. When a representative finally answered, she kept her voice firm and professional. Yes, I'd like to officially remove myself as the financial guarantor for Monica Morgan. Yes, effective immediately. No, I will not be responsible for any future charges. The woman on the other end asked the expected questions. Was she sure? Did she understand what this meant? Had she spoken to her mother? Callie answered them all without hesitation. By the time she hung up, a sense of finality settled in her chest. She wasn't just saying she was done. She was done. The next step was making sure the rest of the family understood that. Sitting in the quiet corner of the cafe, she opened her laptop and composed another email. Subject: Final notice. To whom it may concern. As of today, I have officially removed myself from all financial responsibilities regarding Monica Morgan's care. This means I will not be covering medical bills, prescriptions, or any other expenses. Going forward, these responsibilities will need to be handled by someone else. If you feel that Monica deserves support, I encourage you to step up. I am not open to negotiation or discussion on this matter. Sincerely, Callie Morgan. She hit send. It was done. She sat back in her chair, taking a slow sip of her coffee. For the first time in years, she felt something that had once seemed impossible: freedom. That afternoon, the first call came. It wasn't Uncle Richard or Aunt Denise. It was Monica. Callie stared at the screen, her mother's name flashing like a warning. Her thumb hovered over the answer button before she pressed decline. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The next call came minutes later. Then a text. Then another. Monica, we need to talk. Monica, call me now. Monica, what the hell have you done? Callie read them, her heartbeat steady. She had expected anger. Monica was losing her safety net, her comfortable life of knowing that no matter what, Callie would handle everything. Not anymore. She placed the phone face down on the counter and turned away. She wouldn't be pulled back in. Not this time. Later that evening, Tyler showed up at her apartment. She opened the door to find him standing there, hands stuffed into his hoodie pockets, an uncertain look on his face. I just wanted to check on you, he said. Callie smiled, stepping aside to let him in. Come in. I just made tea. He followed her inside, glancing around her apartment like he had expected it to look different somehow. Maybe it did. Maybe the absence of stress and exhaustion had changed the energy of the space. "You okay?" he asked as he took a seat on the couch. Callie poured them both a cup of tea, handing him one before sitting across from him. "I think so," she said truthfully. "It feels strange, but not bad." Tyler nodded, blowing on his tea. "Mom and Uncle Richard are freaking out. Grandma called everyone." Callie wasn't surprised. "Let me guess, she's playing the victim?" He gave her a half smile. "What do you think?" She sighed. "I expected this." Tyler hesitated before speaking again. "I don't think they'll ever admit it, but they know what you've done for her. They just don't want the responsibility now that you're out." Callie took a slow sip of her tea. "They'll have to figure it out." He watched her for a moment. "I'm proud of you, Aunt Callie. I know this wasn't easy." She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "Thanks, kiddo." He smirked. "Not a kid anymore." "No," she agreed, "you're not." For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving. She was finally living. Callie had barely set her grocery bags on the counter when the loud, rapid knock at her door made her freeze. She already knew who it was. She could feel it. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, letting Monica knock until she tired herself out. But that would only delay the inevitable. Taking a deep breath, she wiped her hands on her jeans and walked to the door. She opened it slowly, bracing herself. There stood Monica Morgan, her sharp brown eyes flashing with barely contained fury. She wasn't hunched over in pain like she often claimed to be. No limp, no wince, no frail demeanor. No, right now, Monica looked every bit the force of nature Callie had grown up fearing. The moment their eyes met, her mother shoved past her, stepping into the apartment without invitation. Callie shut the door behind her, crossing her arms as she turned to face her. "Mom." Monica spun to her, hands on her hips. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Callie exhaled slowly, already exhausted. "I assume you mean the email." "The email?" Monica's voice dripped with disbelief. "You think you can just cut me off like some bill you don't feel like paying anymore?" Callie leaned against the wall, her expression neutral. "That's exactly what I did." Monica let out a short, bitter laugh. "I raised you better than this." Callie arched a brow. "Did you?" Her mother's face twitched. "You're my daughter," Monica hissed. "You owe me." The words struck a nerve, but Callie had prepared for this. "I owed you respect," she said slowly. "I owed you care when you were struggling. And I gave you that. I gave you everything, Mom. And you threw it in my face." Monica scoffed. "Oh, for God's sake, Callie. You're overreacting. It was just a stupid dinner conversation. You know how people talk." Callie's jaw tightened. "No, it was more than that. It was how you really feel about me. You're embarrassed by me. Ashamed." Monica rolled her eyes. "I was venting. You have no idea what it's like to be me." Callie laughed, actually laughed. "No, Mom. I don't know what it's like to be you. But you sure as hell have no idea what it's been like to be me." She stepped closer, her voice firm. "I dropped out of nursing school to take care of you. I paid your bills, covered your treatments, made sure you had everything you needed. Everything, Mom. And you never once said thank you." Monica's mouth opened, but Callie didn't give her a chance to speak. "I worked overtime to keep up with your medical expenses. I gave up vacations, savings, relationships, hell, even my dream of finishing school. And you sat at that dinner table, in front of our entire family, and called me a waste." Monica shifted uncomfortably, her anger flickering with something else, something she wasn't ready to admit. Callie inhaled sharply, her hands clenched at her sides. "You said I act like a martyr? Maybe I do. Maybe that's because I spent 5 years sacrificing for someone who doesn't even respect me." Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "So that's it? You're just washing your hands of me?" "Yes," Callie said, her voice steady. "I'm done." Monica's face twisted in fury. "You can't just walk away." "I already have." There was a silence between them, thick and suffocating. Then, Monica scoffed, shaking her head. "You think this makes you strong?" She took a step closer, her voice lowering to a sharp whisper. "You're selfish, Callie. And when you realize what a mistake you've made, don't come crawling back. Callie held her ground. That won't happen. Monica let out a humorless laugh. We'll see. And then, just as abruptly as she arrived, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Callie didn't move. She stood there, breathing hard, her hands trembling at her sides. She had done it. She had stood up to her mother. And despite the lingering ache in her chest, despite the sting of Monica's words, she felt lighter than she ever had before. The silence in Callie's apartment was deafening after her mother left. For years, Monica's presence, whether physical or just looming over Callie's decisions, had dictated every part of her life. But now, standing in the middle of her living room, Callie realized that for the first time in a long time, she was in control. She had done it. She had stood her ground. She had let go. And now what? She moved to the couch, collapsing onto the cushions as she stared at the ceiling. The confrontation with her mother had drained her, but beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. A spark. A whisper of possibility. She had spent years being everything for someone else. It was time to be something for herself. A thought surfaced, one that had been buried for too long. Nursing school. It was the dream she had left behind when Monica's illness took over both their lives. At the time, it hadn't felt like a choice. Her mother had needed her, and Callie had done what she thought was right. But she had never stopped wanting it. She had never stopped imagining what her life could have been if she had finished what she started. Could she really go back? She pulled out her laptop and typed in the name of her old school, Brighton Medical University. Her heart pounded as the website loaded. She clicked through the admissions page, scanning for information about returning students. There it was. Readmission policy for former students. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clicked the link, skimming the page. She qualified. She would have to submit an updated application and meet with an admissions advisor, but it was possible. She sat back, exhaling slowly. Could she do this? Would she even be able to juggle real estate and school? Doubt tried to creep in, but she pushed it down. She had spent the last 5 years believing she had no other choice but to put herself last. Now, she did have a choice. And she was choosing herself. Without hesitating, she clicked the Apply Now button. The next few days passed in a blur of applications, emails, and planning. Callie submitted her paperwork, scheduled a meeting with the admissions office, and started mapping out what her life could look like if she went back to school. But there was another problem: money. She wasn't about to take on student loans at this stage in her life, and she still had her real estate career to think about. That's when she came up with a plan. If she wanted to make nursing school work, she needed to restructure her business. Instead of working herself to exhaustion, juggling every listing that came her way, she needed to work smarter. She needed an assistant. After a long night of researching, she found a few candidates and scheduled interviews. By the end of the week, she had hired Olivia, a sharp, ambitious young woman who was eager to learn. With Olivia handling paperwork, scheduling, and basic client management, Callie could focus on high-value sales, the kind that would keep her financially stable while giving her time to study. She was setting herself up for success. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sacrificing anything, she was building something. A week later, Callie sat in the admissions office of Brighton Medical University, her hands folded in her lap as she waited. The office smelled the same: polished wood and fresh paper. The same faded posters about nursing careers lined the walls. She remembered sitting here years ago, back when she was a bright-eyed student, ready to take on the world. Before everything changed. Before she had to walk away. The secretary called her name, and she stood, smoothing her blouse as she followed her into the advisor's office. Dr. Patel, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled as she gestured for Callie to sit. "Callie Morgan," she said, glancing at her file. "You were in our program 5 years ago. We were sorry to see you go." Callie nodded. "I didn't want to leave, but life happened." Dr. Patel gave her a knowing look. "It has a way of doing that, doesn't it?" Callie smiled, feeling a little lighter. Yes, it does. Dr. Patel flipped through the file. Your grades were excellent. You were on track to graduate with honors. We would be happy to welcome you back. Callie's breath hitched. Really? Of course, Dr. Patel said. There are a few steps to complete first, some refresher courses, clinical hours, but nothing you can't handle. Callie felt a lump rise in her throat. She had walked in prepared to fight for her spot, but here she was, being given another chance. Another choice. For so long, her life had been dictated by what others needed from her. But now? Now she was stepping forward on her own terms. Dr. Patel smiled. So, Callie, are you ready to come back? Callie exhaled, the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready. The first few weeks of balancing nursing school and real estate were a whirlwind. Callie had always prided herself on being organized, but this was a new level of responsibility, one that stretched her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Mornings started early with nursing classes, where she sat among students several years younger than her, absorbing information she had once known by heart, but had since buried under years of real estate contracts and medical bills. Afternoons were a mad dash between property showings, negotiations, and client meetings, all while training Olivia to take on more responsibilities. Evenings? Those were for studying, poring over textbooks until her vision blurred. But despite the exhaustion, she felt something she hadn't in years. Purpose. She was building a future, one that wasn't defined by obligation, but by choice. And then, out of nowhere, the email arrived. Subject: Nomination for the Brighton Real Estate Excellence Award. Callie stared at the screen, her heart racing. She read the email 3 times before it sank in. She had been nominated for one of the highest awards in her field, an award that recognized resilience, innovation, and leadership in real estate. For years, she had put everything into her career, quietly climbing the ranks while managing her mother's needs. She had never sought recognition. She had never expected anyone to notice. But someone had. And now, she was being honored for it. She sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. A few months ago, she would have called her mother. Even after everything, there was a part of her that had always wanted to share her successes. But that part of her was smaller now. She didn't need Monica's validation. She had done this on her own, and she was going to celebrate it. The night of the awards ceremony, Callie stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting the sleek navy dress that hugged her figure. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Tyler. Tyler, proud of you and Callie. You deserve this. She smiled, warmth filling her chest. For years, she had been so focused on surviving that she had never truly allowed herself to be proud of what she had accomplished. But tonight, that changed. She grabbed her clutch and headed out the door. The event was held in a grand ballroom, filled with some of the most influential figures in the real estate industry. Callie felt a flicker of nervousness as she made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations from colleagues and acquaintances. Then, the moment arrived. The announcer stepped onto the stage, his voice booming through the speakers. And now, the Brighton Real Estate Excellence Award goes to Callie Morgan. Applause erupted. Callie blinked in shock before standing, making her way to the stage. As she took the award, sleek, polished, heavier than she expected, she felt an unfamiliar emotion swell in her chest. Validation. Not from her mother. Not from her family. From herself. She had built this. She had earned this. She stepped up to the microphone, her hands steady. I never expected to be standing here, she began, her voice strong. For a long time, I worked tirelessly without thinking about recognition or awards. I did what I had to do. I built something from nothing. And along the way, I lost myself. I forgot that success isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. She took a breath, letting her words settle. This award means so much to me, not just because of what it represents, but because of what it proves. That no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can rebuild. You can choose yourself. And that's exactly what I did. The room erupted in applause again, but Callie barely heard it. Because for the first time, she wasn't seeking approval. She was owning her success. As the night wound down, Callie stepped out onto the balcony, the crisp air cooling her flushed skin. She pulled out her phone, half expecting a message from her mother. But there was nothing. And that, she realized, was okay. Just as she was about to put her phone away, it buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? There was a beat of silence. Then, a voice she knew all too well. Callie. Monica. Callie's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want, Mom? A pause. Her mother's voice faltered. Then, stronger, I had a medical emergency. Callie's stomach clenched. Are you okay? I'm in the hospital, Monica said, her tone clipped. But don't worry. I'm sure you're too busy to care. The manipulation was immediate, thick in every syllable. Old instincts kicked in. The urge to drop everything, to run to her mother's side. But Callie took a slow breath, centering herself. She had just stood on a stage, holding an award that proved her worth. She wasn't that helpless girl anymore. I'll come by, she said evenly. After I finish what I'm doing here. Monica made a sound of disapproval. Oh, so now I'm an afterthought? Callie closed her eyes. I'll see you later, Mom. And for the first time in her life, she hung up first. The drive to the hospital was nothing like the frantic rushes of the past. No gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. No speeding through yellow lights, heart pounding with panic. This time, Callie took her time. She had promised herself she would no longer drop everything for Monica. Not after the years of sacrifice, the endless giving with nothing in return. The event had been over for nearly an hour when she finally pulled into the hospital parking lot. The Golden Award sat in the passenger seat, catching the glow of the streetlights. She glanced at it before stepping out, straightening her coat. Tonight had been about celebrating herself. That wasn't about to change just because Monica demanded it. Inside, the hospital was a familiar place. Too familiar. Callie had spent too many nights in these hallways, navigating insurance forms, advocating for better treatment, pushing aside her own exhaustion for her mother's sake. She stopped at the front desk. Monica Morgan's room, please. The nurse glanced at the screen. Room 314. Callie nodded, making her way to the elevators. When she reached the third floor, she found the door slightly ajar. She stepped inside. Monica lay in the hospital bed, and 4 in her arm, her expression carefully neutral. But her eyes flickered with something else, something close to annoyance when she saw Callie. Nice of you to finally show up, Monica said, her voice dry. Callie exhaled, setting her purse down. What happened? Monica pursed her lips. Doctor said it was a small heart episode. Stress-related. Callie nodded, waiting. She knew what was coming next. Sure enough, her mother sighed dramatically. But I suppose you wouldn't know anything about stress, would you? You've been too busy living your glamorous life. Callie almost laughed. There it was. The guilt trip. The attempt to pull her back in. The old Callie might have fallen for it. She might have rushed to her mother's side, apologized for not coming sooner, asked what she could do. Not anymore. She crossed her arms. I was at an awards event. Monica blinked. What? Callie pulled the Golden Award from her purse, setting it on the table beside the hospital bed. I won this tonight, she said, her voice even. It's a career milestone. A recognition of everything I've worked for. Monica glanced at it, her expression unreadable. Then, she scoffed. Oh, Callie. A little plaque doesn't change anything. Callie met her mother's gaze, feeling something inside her settle. It changes everything, she said. Monica's lips thinned. So, what? You came here to rub it in my face? No, Callie said. I came here to remind myself. She straightened, her voice steady. For years, I lived for you. I gave up my dreams. I took care of everything. And you treated me like it was expected. Like it was owed. Monica's mouth opened, but Callie held up a hand. I'm not here to argue, Mom. I'm here to tell you that I'm done with that version of myself. Monica's expression flickered, just for a moment. And what does that mean? It means, Callie said, picking up her purse, that I won't be manipulated anymore. A pause. Then Monica let out a sharp laugh. So that's it? You'll just walk away? Leave your own mother in a hospital bed? Callie's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. I'm not leaving you, she said. I'm leaving the guilt. I'm leaving the expectation that I have to give up everything to prove my worth to you. Monica watched her, something unreadable in her eyes. For the first time, she looked uncertain. You think you're so strong now, Monica murmured. Callie smiled, but there was no sadness in it. I know I am. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving the award on the table behind her. Let her mother look at it. Let her see what Callie had built. Because Callie wasn't asking for her approval anymore. She was standing on her own. The cold night air brushed against Callie's skin as she stepped out of the hospital. She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, watching the white cloud of her breath disappear into the darkness. She had done it. She had walked away, not just physically, but emotionally. For the first time in her life, she had refused to be manipulated. The weight that had lived on her shoulders for years, the ever-present expectation that she owed her mother something, was finally lifting. And yet, her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked her car door. Not because she was afraid of what she had done, but because she had never allowed herself to do it before. She slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, her thoughts racing. Monica had always been good at making Callie feel like she was overreacting. Like her sacrifices were just a given, something expected of her. But the past few months had opened Callie's eyes. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't wrong. She had done everything for her mother. And Monica had never once truly appreciated it. A part of Callie had hoped, deep down, that her mother's face would soften tonight, that she would finally acknowledge what Callie had done for her. But that wasn't who Monica Morgan was. And Callie had finally accepted that. She turned the key in the ignition, the engine humming to life. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She glanced down. A text from Tyler. Tyler, you okay? Callie smiled faintly, her fingers tapping out a response. Callie, yeah. Just left the hospital. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then reappeared. Tyler, she told everyone. Callie let out a slow breath, shaking her head. Of course, Monica had wasted no time making herself the victim. Callie, what's the damage? A pause. Tyler, Uncle Richard is talking about family duty. Aunt Denise says you're heartless. Laura is saying you only care about yourself. But Aunt Linda? She called them all out. Callie's brows lifted. Aunt Linda? Tyler, she told them you've been paying for everything for 5 years, and they have no right to judge you. She even told Uncle Richard that if he thinks family duty is so important, he can open his own wallet for once. Callie let out a soft, surprised laugh. She should have expected that. Aunt Linda had always been the only one in the family who really saw Callie. Callie, I owe her a drink. Tyler, she'd probably prefer a whole bottle. Callie grinned, shaking her head. Then, another message appeared. Tyler, I hope you know I have your back. No matter what. Her throat tightened. She had lost the need for her mother's validation. But knowing she had someone in her corner, that mattered more than she could put into words. Callie, I know. Thanks, Ty. She put the car in drive, pulling out of the parking lot. She didn't need to go home just yet. There was somewhere else she needed to go. 20 minutes later, Callie stood in front of Aunt Linda's house, knocking softly. The door swung open almost immediately. Linda, still in her robe, raised a brow. You know it's almost midnight, right? Callie smirked. I figured you were still awake. You never sleep before 1. Linda rolled her eyes, but stepped aside, letting her in. Callie settled onto the couch, sighing as she sank into the cushions. Linda plopped down next to her, scrutinizing her. So, you finally cut the cord. Callie nodded. I did. Linda nodded approvingly. About damn time. Callie chuckled. I take it you heard the family's reaction? Linda scoffed. Heard it? I shut it down. Callie gave her a grateful look. I saw Tyler's texts. You really told Richard to open his own wallet. Linda smirked. And you should have seen his face. Like I'd suggested he donate a kidney. Callie shook her head, smiling. Then, her expression softened. Thank you, Linda. Really, for always having my back. Linda waved a dismissive hand. You were the only one keeping that woman afloat, and they all let you. It's about time someone told them the truth. Callie exhaled. It still feels weird. Like I'm waiting for the guilt to hit. Linda gave her a long look. That's just the old programming in your head. You've spent your whole life feeling responsible for her. It's gonna take time to unlearn that. Callie bit her lip. And what if she really does need me one day? Linda's expression softened. Then you decide what you want to do. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because you choose it. Callie let the words settle in. For years, her entire existence had revolved around Monica's needs. Now, she had the freedom to make her own choices, and she wasn't going to waste it. Linda patted her knee. You did good, kid. Callie smiled. You're the only one who ever calls me kid. Linda grinned. Old habits. Callie exhaled, sitting back. So, I officially got back into nursing school. Linda's brows lifted. No kidding. Callie nodded. I start in a few weeks. And I figured out a way to keep my real estate business running, too. Linda beamed. Now that's what I like to hear. Callie smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in years, her future wasn't something she had to put on hold. It was hers to shape. And she couldn't wait to see where it took her. The smell of fresh coffee filled Callie's apartment as she sat at her kitchen table, a nursing textbook open in front of her, highlighter in hand. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the neatly stacked real estate files beside her. A year ago, she would have never imagined this. Balancing nursing school and real estate. Living for herself instead of constantly managing her mother's needs. She had built this life on her own terms. Her phone buzzed beside her. She glanced at the screen. A message from Brighton Medical University. Congratulations! Your academic standing has placed you in the top 10% of your returning class. Keep up the excellent work. Callie let out a slow breath, a small smile forming. She was doing it. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And for the first time, she felt like she belonged in this new chapter of her life. That afternoon, Callie met Tyler for lunch at their usual cafe. Tyler, now taller than her and growing into his own confidence, grinned as he waved her over to their table. You look different, he noted as she sat down. Like, lighter. Callie smirked. I feel different. Tyler leaned back in his chair. I still can't believe you're back in school and running your business. That's badass. Callie chuckled. It's a lot, but I finally figured out how to make it work for me. Tyler's grin widened. I told you, Aunt Callie. You were never the problem. Grandma just didn't want to lose her safety net. Callie nodded, sipping her coffee. And she'll have to figure things out on her own now. Tyler hesitated before speaking. Have you talked to her? Callie shrugged. Not since the hospital. Tyler studied her, then nodded approvingly. You know, I think that's the best decision you've made. Callie smiled, warmth filling her chest. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. She had let go. And that was the real victory. A few months later, Callie stood at the front of a lecture hall, giving a presentation to her nursing classmates. Public speaking had never been her favorite thing, but as she spoke about patient care and advocacy, she realized something. She wasn't nervous. She belonged here. As she finished, her professor smiled. Excellent insight, Callie. Your real-world experience brings a valuable perspective. Callie sat down, a quiet pride settling in her chest. She wasn't the same woman who had walked away from nursing school years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and she was going to finish what she started. One evening, Callie received an unexpected email. Subject: Your story matters. Dear Callie, I came across your journey through mutual connections, and I am deeply moved by your story of perseverance, career reinvention, and personal growth. We would love to feature you in an upcoming piece about individuals who have overcome family obligations to reclaim their dreams. If you're open to sharing, please let us know. Best, Rebecca Tran. Journalist, Brighton Gazette. Callie stared at the screen, stunned. Her story was inspiring others? She had spent so much of her life feeling unseen, like everything she did was just part of an endless cycle of sacrifice. But now, people were recognizing her for her. She exhaled, fingers hovering over the keyboard before she typed out a response. I'd love to share my story. Let's set up a time to talk. As she hit send, she felt it deep in her bones. This was her new beginning. Her life, her choices, finally, completely hers.